All right, folks, as we get started here, I got to tell you, I was really surprised to see that one of the exam objectives under Install and Configure Desktop Applications was Manage App V Applications. I mean, I was really just dismayed. I was even shocked to see that they would put this on the exam. Why is that? Well, it's really not even a Microsoft client topic. I mean, there's some things you'll do on the client, and you'll see that when I demonstrate that here towards the end of this particular nugget, but it's really, in my opinion, pretty far out of place. I could understand if they said manage app v client settings, something like that, but otherwise, in terms of managing app v applications, that's pretty much a huge undertaking. What we're really being tasked with here is knowing how to kind of operate app v on the client, but the exam objective really points us to the server. So it's kind of like being told, well, you need to know how to drive a stick shift. But in order to do that, you need to understand how to totally disassemble and reassemble an entire transmission. This shows you how much I know about transmissions. I'm not even sure that is a transmission. Some of you automotive people out there probably do, but I just looked at the scariest picture I could find on the internet. That looks like it. So this is what we're going to do here. I'm going to try to take us from this, which is where you really need to be, I think, when it comes to the client side of things. And I'm going to try to get us as far over here as I can without actually doing a full server topic. I'm probably going to park somewhere around in here, getting us part way there. And this is still going to be more information than I'm sure you're going to need to have for the exam. So you're not only going to get exam-worthy information in this nugget, you're going to get a lot of bonus material. And it's kind of useful, too, because App V is, I think, kind of the next big thing in terms of how applications are going to be deployed for Microsoft operating systems. But I also have to point out, you should really look at, if you're interested in this, you should look at Greg Shields' 70-416 series for CBT Nuggets. There's probably nobody who's more of an expert in all of these kinds of topics than Greg Shields. He really knows what he's talking about, and he will completely disassemble and reassemble this entire transmission here for you, and you'll really know App V by the time you're done with that. Anyway, let's move on, and we'll take a look first of all here at why we would even want to use App V. Then we'll take a look at what the App V components are. In other words, we're going to look at all the nuts and bolts of this thing, and then at least in the big picture of things. And then we're going to take a look at the broad steps and a demo of App V, and that'll be where we get to play with all of the switches. Actually, switch the gears and see how fast this thing can go. Let's go ahead and get started. First of all, why would we even want to use App V? I mean, when we think about installing applications, we usually just pop in a CD, we let the wizard start, we go next, finish, and now we have whatever application it is that we want. However, in corporate environments, this is really not always practical. Number one, I can't just take a CD to every single machine. There's just not the personnel to be able to do that, and we have tens of thousands of desktops or hundreds of thousands. The other part of that would be that, so first, why even use App V? Well, when we think of installing applications in the traditional sense for desktops, you just put in the CD and you next finish through some wizard, and there you go. Really not practical for large corporations where you have tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of desktops and laptops. So that's one of the reasons why, is because this is actually going to avoid, actually I'm kind of out of order here, aren't I? It's going to avoid a full rollout where you have to do kind of a manual installation. There are other solutions that you can also use to install applications, such as using group policy objects, which is kind of an interim solution. It's really still not best for larger corporate environments, but for small to medium it might work out pretty well. But there's also other issues such as cross-compatibility. For example, in large corporations, you might have one department, let's just call this Department A. Okay, Department A over here. And that's not very neat, sorry about that. Anyway, they can only use version 1 of a specific application. Department B, however, they're more hip and with it. And they've already upgraded to version 2. Oops! But turns out these two departments have to exchange documents back and forth together. Version 2 saves version 2 types of documents, and version 1 can't read those types of documents. And they don't have authorization to do a full installation of version 2 of the app yet, because it hasn't gone through all the red tape and all the regression testing and all this kind of stuff that they may require. So what we could do over here in Department A is say, hey, we're kind of stuck with version 1, but let's just go ahead and on our little desktops over here, Okay, maybe this is my little desktop. I'm going to, where I've got version 1 installed, we're going to just kind of install a little bubble on top of this called version 2 of the app. It's really not completely installed, per se. Nobody went next finish and installed it. But it exists there, and I can use it. And it hasn't made its inroads in a full installation into the operating system itself, and yet I still get all the benefits of actually using version 2 of the app. That way, when Department B over here creates version 2 app, I can use this version of the app. And otherwise, within our own department, I can still use version 1, which of course will probably still be readable by this department over here. So anyway, you get the idea there. We can use some cross-compatibility if we have two departments that use different versions and we have a problem reading the documents or exchanging them. The other thing we do is we have to use this when we have that same problem that I just discussed, and we cannot install both versions at once. For example, if we had version 1 over here, and then we just decided to install version 2 and we wanted it to exist alongside of it, we really can't do that. Because what would happen is version 2 would completely overwrite version 1, and then we wouldn't be able to have version 1 at all anymore. Okay, so that's very often what happens as well. It's kind of more of an upgrade of an application instead. Or it could be that we have entirely different applications. Maybe we have, over here, app 1, and maybe it opens up, TIFF files. Maybe we have a graphic arts department that works with TIFFs. But in the other department over here, we don't use app 1. We like to use app 2 because it gives us different features for our department that we need and everything like that. That's how we open up our TIFF files. So now again, we have entirely different apps, but if over here in app 2 they work with a TIFF file and it does something that I can't use to read in app 1, then again, I might just over here have to install app 2. Oh, it's getting kind of messy here. And again, kind of in a little bubble here that allows me to use it, and that would be my app V application, where it's not fully really installed, but I still get to use app 2 pretty much as if it were, and the users really won't even be able to tell the difference. It's also going to be more lightweight. We don't always have to download all of the files for app 2. Maybe app 2 is a 2 gigabyte installation of some high-end graphic arts application. Well, you're still going to need some space there, so it's not going to be completely light, but it'll be less of a burden than it would be if we had a full installation. Also, these will have a minimal effect. These app V things here, they're going to have a minimal effect on the host operating system. Because again, it's not a full installation where it fully invades that operating system and affects everything. Also, you can cache the app for offline use. So let's say that with these machines that we're talking about are actually laptops. And while we're in the office, we can get this app V application, which actually is going to be delivered from an app V server. But when we're disconnected from the network, like we're on an airplane or on a laptop somewhere else, we don't have access to that application. Well, in other traditional methods, such as remote desktop protocol methods, we'd pretty much just be cut off, and we really wouldn't have an access to it unless we came up with some other solution. Well, with app V, you can also cache those apps for offline use. By the way, this is just a short list. There's a lot of other reasons for using app V. These are some of the items that kind of come to mind for app V. Now let's take a look also at the app V components. We'll be looking at this in more detail both in the next whiteboard and in the demo. One of the things you're going to have is SQL Server. This in itself is, again, you can see this goes way beyond client installation. And that's, again, why I said we're kind of having to learn how to rebuild a transmission here. The SQL Server, again, is its own full topic. But if we just, in my installation, I'm not going to show you all the gory details of the installation, but I just did a next finish with really no customizations of any kind. I just let it do its thing on its own and kind of did the dumb installation. There's also Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack, or MDOP. App V itself that we've been discussing here, it's really not its own standalone kind of an application. It's really part of a bigger package called the MDOP. And again, that's the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Package. And this is something that volume license customers are able to get. App V Server and all of the App V components are on the same CD as MDOP. What we need to do here on that particular server, and by the way, I've installed SQL and App V both on the same server, but they don't have to be. I've installed IIS, because you have to have IIS if you're going to use App V Server the way I'm going to show it to you here. And you have to have many additions. So, for example, you have to have some ISAPI capabilities. You have to have some .NET capabilities and so on that are beyond just a basic installation of IIS, and you will see that in the prerequisites as you go through the wizard. In fact, if you don't have everything you need, it'll tell you exactly what you do need to install, and it makes it very easy in that regard. Also, you need to install this as an administrator. Now, you would think, of course, James, you're installing an application. Don't you always have to do that? Yes. However, if you think about most apps that you install, even if it's Microsoft Word or something like that, when you launch the installation, it elevates using user account control, saying, hey, are you an administrator? Click yes if you are, or enter in the proper credentials. Whereas when you install the AppV server, contrary to Microsoft's own guidelines for application installation, the programmers didn't force it to elevate it. So when you install it, you have to actually right-click on it and choose Run as Admin. All right. Also, this is critical. Manually open the firewall. Many applications that use firewall, that need a firewall opening, will open their ports in Windows Firewall automatically during the installation. This does not. So you have to make sure that you open up the ports on the firewall manually using the advanced firewall. I'll show you how to do that. Also, you need to disable the Internet Explorer Enhanced Security configuration, and that's only for the purposes of installing Silverlight, which is necessary to run the web interface for this. Okay. The AppV client sequencer is going to appear on whatever operating system it is that you plan to deploy your application to. So maybe I've got 1,000 Windows 8 clients in my environment. Well, I'll take an AppV client sequencer. This is going to be kind of a test dummy installation of Windows 8. And what I do with this is I install the application using the AppV client sequencer on that Windows 8 machine. And this is just going to be kind of a representative of what I intend to do on my 1,000 Windows 8 computers. What this will do is it'll track the ordinary installation. As I go next, finish, it monitors everything that happens to the registry. It monitors every new and changed file that gets created, and it collects all of those changes into a package known as an app. It'll be an AppV extension here, so star.appv. And that'll be what it has, and it has several other accompanying files as well. This is going to be, this machine right here, this AppV client sequencer, is best as a snapshot VM. What you want to do usually is start with a very clean one, maybe just an out-of-the-box installation of Windows 8 or whatever the operating system is. And then you'll want to install the application running the AppV client sequencer so that it can keep track of all of these things. The reason why you want it to be very clean is so that it doesn't also pick up things that are made by other services or applications or background tasks or any of those kinds of things. Because if it picks up, for example, something that your antivirus scanner is doing, and it notices that in newer changed files or maybe a registry change that was made, it'll think that that's part of the application you're installing when it was really part of the antivirus application or some other application. Okay. Also, you'll need a network share for the packages. All of the stuff that we come up with in this step right here, when we save our files and save our package, that needs to be stored in a network share because that's where all your clients are going to actually download the necessary components to run that app. Now, as I open up this next whiteboard, I do want to point out, I know we've gone through several whiteboards already. We're going to do a demo shortly here, and I want to just be patient because this whiteboard right here in particular is going to be pretty important. I do want to point out these are the broad AppV steps. There's some kind of sub-steps in the middle of all of this, which you'll see in the demo, but this will give you the idea of where we're headed to. Also, remember, all AppV is actually from the MDOP, and you need to get that from Microsoft, or if you have a TechNet subscription, you can download that as part of your TechNet. Now, the AppV client sequencer is the first thing that you'll need. Again, this is going to be an actual Windows 8, or it could be a Windows 7, or any other current version of Windows. And it's going to be a very clean, hopefully a virtual machine. It doesn't have to be, but for practical purposes, that's what we usually use. Because we start with a clean machine, we install the AppV client sequencer, and then we will install our application, and then we'll usually revert back to the initial kind of baseline machine for our next package that we want to sequence. You'll install the AppV sequencer. And it's again on the CD for MDOP. You'll run the sequencer, and when you run it, you'll see this as it comes up here in a moment. Then you'll tell it that you're going to install an application, and then you'll actually do that installation and make any changes that you want. For example, maybe the first time you run the application, there's a license agreement that you have to agree to, or something like this, or a product key, or something like that. Well, what you'll do is you'll actually do that there because you don't want that to always appear on the client side of things. You'll take care of that in advance that'll be registered in the registry or in a file change or something like that. Then that way it'll be kind of pre-packaged and already configured for the client when they actually install this as an AppV app. Then you'll save the package to, you can save it to the local hard drive, but ultimately you need to copy it to a share. And then the AppV server side of things, what will happen is, again, you have to install SQL. It doesn't have to be on the AppV server. It can be on a remote machine, but then you have to do a few other things to make sure that it can be accessed remotely. For simplicity's sake, I've just installed everything on the same machine here on the AppV server. So it's got SQL. It's also got AppV server installed on it. And then in order to manage all of this, it's really very simple. The UI is quite simple and has very little that you can even do with it. You'll use a web management console to provision the AppV package that we created up here on the sequencer in the first portion of this. Now, especially in a corporate environment, you're going to have a domain controller anyway. And on the domain controller, what you need to do is to add AppV ADMX files. Now, we haven't even gotten into this yet, I don't think. What's an ADMX? This is what kind of creates all the skeletal structure for a group policy. This is what exposes the various options and the checkboxes and radio buttons for various kinds of options. So you have ADMX files that are already there out of the box, but you also have other ones you can download. For example, Microsoft Office has a whole bunch that you can download if you want to customize different things like, I don't know, the toolbar, the dictionary, stuff like that. And this is all going to be stored in a group policy object. The whole purpose of ADMX files is for group policies. You don't have to do this next step, but I strongly recommend that you create a central store. This means then that no matter where you edit the group policy from, you'll always have the same settings. And there won't be a disparity between different administrators, different versions of ADMX files. You're all drawing from a central location where the ADMX files are going to be stored. Then you just create your GPO and create all the settings, and I'll demonstrate that. For the AppV target, this is going to be the actual machines out there on the desktops and the little cubicles and everything. What you'll want to do is to install the AppV client. Now, this in itself is not really a topic I'm touching on much here, but you need to figure out an efficient way to do that. Again, a group policy object would probably be a good way to deploy the AppV clients just to get started. But since AppV is part of MDOP, it actually involves many other moving parts that could be used to deploy that AppV client. I'm just going to install it manually just because we have to have it. Also, make sure that the account, the computer account that is in the correct OU so that it is in the scope of management for this GPO that we're creating down here. Okay. And then what you'll do is you'll just refresh the client, and I'll show you how to do that here. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the demo so we can get all these moving parts working together and hopefully shift into first gear. So here we go, first of all, to a Windows 8 client computer. This one's pretty clean. You know, probably ideally it would have nothing installed. Remember, we installed Google Chrome elsewhere in this series. But here I've got the AppV sequencer, and it's on the DVD in the AppV subdirectory installers. And then there's Service Pack 1 here. You can do 5.0 or Service Pack 1. The big difference with Service Pack 1 is it just supports more languages. Anyway, we go to the sequencer here, and then I double-clicked on that to bring us up to this. Okay. From this point, we simply click on Install. Of course, you got to do the usual agreements to the license agreement. You can join the Customer Improvement program if you want to. I'm not going to for now. And then just install it. Once that's been done, we'll then be able to launch it and install some other application. Of course, we have to have user account control. This is what I was saying earlier. When you install the AppV server, it doesn't bring this up. It just tells you that you can't install it, but the client apparently does allow you to do this using Elevated. So anyway, we go ahead and go through the installation, and when that's done, we'll come back. All right, so the setup has completed. Now I'm going to go to the start screen here. I still say start menu sometimes. Anyway, then I'll go to the Microsoft Application Virtualization Sequencer. This is what's going to track all of the changes when I perform an installation of something. And in our case, I'm just going to use WinZip. Why? Because it's a commonly used application. And it's small and easy to demonstrate for our purposes. So I'm going to create a new AppV package. And then I'm going to just go through the wizard, create an AppV package. And by the way, there's also a package accelerator. What's that about? When we create this package, it's going to collect all of the files and registry settings and so forth in a package and then deploy that to the client. An accelerator would be, it's going to monitor all of the changes, but the client on the client side of things has access to either Shiny Media or the setup file on a thumb drive or maybe somewhere else on a network drive or something like that. And when we use the package accelerator, it's going to be able to pull from actually that source media instead of from a full package. That's all that is. But for our purposes, we're just going to work with a package, and I think you'll be fine with that. Now, you'll run into some issues here, and this is where it's going to tell you you have some things you have to work with. Normally, or possibly, I might consider just figuring some of this stuff out offline. However, I want to show you how to work with these because these do have some relevance for other things here as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to the start screen again and Windows Defender. And we'll go to Windows Defender. In order to stop Windows Defender, which, by the way, is our antivirus software, so this is really both the same thing when we look at those two items. What I'll need to do here is to go to Settings, and then I'm going to turn off real-time protection, and then go to Administrator and turn off Windows Defender. Now, you don't have to do this on every client computer. We're only doing that for this specific machine. Okay, where we're making this sequenced package. On your destination clients, where this is actually going to deploy WinZip, not really an issue. So I'm going to go ahead and save these changes. Of course, we're currently at risk. You do want to make sure that the machine that you run these things from and you run your sequenced packages from is on a, I'm going to cancel this for the time being, is on a safe location. So maybe an isolated machine that is not necessarily easily attacked because it won't have antivirus protection. Next thing I'll do is restart this and then go back to the wizard, and when we do that, we'll continue on. While that machine is restarting, I've decided to go over here to my Hyper-V Manager. This is a physical server that I have that's running all of the machines that I'm demonstrating here, and that's what I usually use for just about every demonstration we have here. It's just kind of obscured from us, and it looks like it's actually a physical desktop most of the time. Anyway, the reason I'm here is because I want to show you this Windows 8 client that I'm working with. This is my Hyper-V machine that I'm using all of my sequencing on. So here's before the Hyper-V sequencer was installed. Right now it looks like the machine has restarted and everything looks fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a snapshot. Okay, and this is going to be kind of my baseline Hyper-V machine that I'm going to use anytime I want to sequence an application. So I'm going to rename this, for example. I'm going to say reset to here to sequence apps. Okay. So I can install an app down here, like right now. I'm going to install WinZip with the sequencer, and then when I'm done, I'm going to reset back to this location where nothing else was really installed. That gives us back to a kind of a known clean situation where we don't really have any interference from other applications. Again, I've got Chrome there, but I don't think that's going to be too big of an issue in our case. So now we're ready to go back into our Windows 8 client computer where I'm elevating privilege to run the AppV sequencer. I'm going to create a new AppV package, and I'm going to go ahead and go through the same steps we did before, only this time we don't get stopped by the little yellow triangles because everything's okay to go on. So I click on Next. I'm going to work with a standard application. There's also plugins like maybe an IE plugin, something like that, or middleware, which is something that has to be required for another application to work. For our case, we're just going to use a standard application. Then I'm going to select the installer for the application. This can be an exe file or an MSI. I'm going to browse for the exe for WinZip, which I think I've got it downloaded here. There it is. Actually, I've got my MSI file there. And this is kind of a trick that I use sometimes. What I'll do is, when you download WinZip, it's actually an exe. But I double-clicked on it to expose an MSI file. And the reason why I did that was because I'll use this for a number of purposes. I might use it for AppV like I am here, although I don't have to. Or I might use this MSI for a group policy installation, which is a totally other subject, but it's another way to deploy an application. Anyway, here's my MSI file. I'm just going to go ahead and launch this, and we'll click on Next. When I run setup for the WinZip application, when I say to expose the MSI file, it does so in the temporary directory, and I just extracted it from there. The virtual application package name, I'll just call this WinZip 17. And the primary virtual application directory, or the PVAD. What this is going to be the normal application where this would install. In other words, if I wasn't using AppV and I was just doing a normal installation of WinZip, what directory would it go into? It would go into C:, is it a colon? Yeah. / program files, WinZip. Okay. Now don't try to get fancy with this and say, well, we like to keep ours on //WinZip files /WinZip app or anything different than that. Why? Because if the normal installation of the application would go into this directory, but you specify something else in this line instead, it'll really give you some performance problems. Okay, because it kind of gets lost and it has to re-find where you decided to customize your application. So don't try to get fancy on that part. All right, we're going to just continue on here and let the installation begin. And here's our WinZip installer. I just click on Next. And as I'm going through all of this, by the way, it's the sequencer is just tracking everything that's going on, every new or changed file, every registry changed, all of those things is what it's tracking here. And I'm just going to use a typical installation. But again, for your corporation, if you used custom installation, maybe you wanted to select different file types that it opens or something like that, you could do that. Okay, so I'm making all of these changes, and I'm clicking on Next and letting it do its thing. So from this part of it, it's really just installing an application in an ordinary way. Then when this is completed, I can launch WinZip 7, okay, and click on Finish. One reason why I might want to do this, again, is if there's a product key that has to be entered in or something like this, then I would want to make sure to take care of that here in the beginning. Now, in our case, I'm just using the eval version. There's not really a way around this part of it. But for any of those other things I would do. For example, here, show tips at startup. Well, I don't want that to happen. My users know how to use WinZip, so I'll say never show tips at startup, and I'll close that. And then I can make any other changes here I want to, any other customizations. Now I'll go ahead and close that again. The other thing I can do is possibly restart the computer. Notice that up here it tells you that if the installer requests a restart, this sequencer will also resume after the restart. Okay. You could also run additional items. What if, along with WinZip, we had some kind of another utility or something we wanted to package along with this? We could do that. We just click Run here and add in those other executable files. I'm not going to do that. We're going to keep it simple, and I'm going to finish installing here. Here's where it collects all the system changes, and we should see this appear as a item on the desktop here shortly, a folder that I will then copy to either a network share that's going to be easily accessible or to the AppV server. Regardless, it's going to be in a share because my clients will need to be able to access it. And then when we get to this page, here it's going to ask us to run WinZip. Now, I really already did that because that's part of the installation. Not all applications have that, though. So regardless, when we get here, I'm going to go ahead and run this. And again, it's going to take me through the same kind of stuff, but that's okay. I'm just going to blow past all of this. Notice that I didn't get my little wizard or whatever that was, my help screen. And I'm going to click on Next. And again, it's going to collect the system changes. Now, here it gives you kind of a summary of everything that took place. We get a little warning triangle here. That's not anything I think we need to be concerned about. I think that's just some temporary files that were... okay, so here's just some temporary files that were excluded from the package, but it should still work out just fine. So we're going to go ahead and go past that. And then we're pretty much done. So we don't need to do anything else. If you wanted to customize further, you could do that. We're just going to finish with this, and I'm going to save the package to the desktop, and you'll see that folder appear as I mentioned a moment ago. While that package is being saved to the desktop, I've gone over here to my AppV server. I haven't got everything ready yet. What I want to do is I've created a source directory where the AppV package that we're working with, the WinZip thing, is going to be stored. But I have to share that. And I need to add, in this case, I'm just going to add everyone, but with read-only access. And that's a common kind of an access, or domain users would be another example. Or if you wanted to granularly tighten that down, you could make it available only to the very department that you want to deploy the apps to, or something like this. Regardless, now that it's shared, I'm going to go back over here to my Windows machine, close this up. We're pretty well done with all of this. Okay, and I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy it over to that server. So my AppV server is /appv, and then I can't remember the directory. There it is, source. So I'm going to paste this in. And the reason why I'm allowed to paste it in is because the trainer account had full access. So it allows me to have read and write access. That's pretty much it. I'm really done with this Windows 8 machine. I've sequenced the package. There it is. If you want to take a look at it, there's an AppV package there that's kind of a summary of everything. There's an XML report. There's an MSI file. There's all kinds of accompanying files along with this. But since I'm done with that, in a real world, this is what I would do. I'd go back to my Hyper-V machine. I'd go back to this Windows 8 client here, and I would go reset here to sequence apps. I would apply that snapshot, and that would go back to its previous point in time. Now here I am at our AppV server itself. If I click on the start screen, we can see that we've already got a few things going on. You can see that I've got some SQL components here. I've got SQL already installed. And I've also already installed the AppV server. So I'm going to go back to the desktop here. Now, one of the things I want to do is I need to manage this from a web interface, and I can't really do that with the enhanced security configuration turned on. So I need to turn that off right now. The reason being that it's very tight in terms of security on a server. It's more locked down than you'll see on your client computers, and it does not allow you to install things like various add-ons like Silverlight. It doesn't allow you to pretty much go to any web page unless you specifically add it to the list of trusted servers, trusted sites. So now that I've got that done, here I'm going to go back here and launch Internet Explorer, and we're going to go to http:// and then it's going to be appv 8080, and then it's actually going to be the console. Okay. Oops, it looks like I was at Applebee's recently. Hey, what can I say? I'm a sucker for the Bourbon Street steak. Anyway, so we'll go ahead and launch this. The first time you do it, you have to install Silverlight, so you got to do all of this stuff. And once that's been done, and it's all installed, I'll come back and we'll take a look at our console. Okay, here we are at the AppV server. You can see here that I've just entered in the address. Notice that after the name of the server here in the URL, I put a colon and an 8080. Why is that? Well, it's somewhat arbitrary, but as you run the AppV setup from the CD, which I've already installed here, there will be an opportunity to enter in both actually there's three things. One of those would be the management, which is on a specific port. I chose 8080. There's another one which is publishing, which I chose as 8081, and then there's a reporting a reporting component, and I gave that one port 8082. So you set up these on different unused ports in your environment, and those are the ones that I chose, but you can choose whichever ones you want. Best to choose those that are over 1024 so that they're not well-known ports. Anyway, I open this up, and this is really all there is to it. Not really a whole lot here. If I go to the overview, this really just gives you some colorful squares to click on. And all these really do is take you to other places down through here, except for the AppV sequencer, which you do on the client, and we've already done that. That's where I installed WinZip here a little while ago. So here, if I go down here to our packages, this is where I actually set those up and make them prepared for clients to use. So here's how you actually install a package or add a package. You just click on Add Package up there in the upper right, and then you can browse for this. Notice that the actual package, let me go to Windows Explorer here. Notice that it's on the C drive, and I'm ultimately looking for this appv file. But you don't want to point in to C://. You don't do that. You point it to a UNC path instead. And I'm just going to do that here. So I'll just go whack whack. No, it's appv. And then there's my source, and then there's WinZip17, and then there's my WinZip17.appv. So I'll open that. Okay. Again, don't use a local path. Use a UNC path, because that's what your clients will need to access it through, is through a network. Then you just click on Add, and that's pretty much all there is to that part of it. However, I still need to also provision who actually gets this application, and also, let me close this now that it's been added. I also need to enter in who gets it, and then I need to publish it. So you can also enter in a package description, hello WinZip. Let's keep it zipped. That doesn't sound right. Let me just delete that part of it. Anyway, so you get the idea here. You just enter in some arbitrary description, then you can edit the Active Directory access, in other words, who has access. It's pretty broadly available, I think, so I'm just going to enter in Nugget Lab. That's the name of my domain. And then how about domain users? You can check that for typos or anything, and there it is. Okay, looks okay. I'll grant access. Don't forget to click grant access, otherwise nothing happens. Okay, then I'll close that part of it. Now we can see that domain users have access. We're not going to really get into this too much, but there's also connection groups. And for that, I'm going to go over here, actually, to connection groups. And here what we could do is, I could say, connection group 1, and you, of course, could name that whatever you want it to be. And any published applications you have, and I don't have any there yet, maybe I've got 3 or 4 published applications, I could add them all into this connection group. And that way, when they install, instead of installing each one separately, it installs the whole package of all 3 of them at once. That's kind of the whole idea behind that. But otherwise, next thing I need to do is just publish this. Notice that I can also edit certain aspects of this. so I can edit the default configuration, and I can see what file types are available, for WinZip, what shortcuts are available. I can add different shortcuts if I want to. I can add a new shortcut here, for example, and use this UI. I can go into advanced settings, and I can export the configuration for use on a different AppV server, for example. Maybe I've spent a lot of time getting this looking just perfect, and I've got an administrator in a different department that also uses AppV. I can export this and allow them to kind of borrow my work there if they want to. So there's some of the ideas there. We also have the various AppV servers. We can remove them if we want to, or register additional AppV servers if you want to. And then also we have administrators. I've only got the one user in my case, but you can add, of course, additional ones if you want to. And though, before I forget, let me go to a very critical item here, and that's the firewall. I'll go to Windows, Firewall, with Advanced Configuration. You do need to go into this one with Advanced Configuration. The reason for that is, you'll see here that I've already opened up, I think I've opened up, maybe I didn't do it yet, open up the firewall for all of those ports that were installed with the AppV server. You know what? I don't think I did add it. So let me do this. I'm going to add a new rule here, and I'm going to call this one, I'm going to open up certain ports. Okay. Actually, I remember now I excluded this on purpose because I wanted to show you how to do this. At least that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Then we enter in the ports that we want to open up. And we need to open up 3 ports, 8080, 8081, and 8082. Again, for management, publishing, and reporting. So I'm going to go 8080, 8081, 8082, and I'm opening up those specific TCP ports. I'm going to allow the connection, and then you can also specify what kind of conditions, whether it's going to be in the domain profile, private profile, or public. Those two are probably fine, but I'm going to leave out public because we wouldn't want just anybody accessing that. And then I'll just call this app v ports. Okay. Then we'll click on finish. That's pretty much it. Now those ports are open, and it should allow for our applications to be visible and published. Then here I've switched over to my domain controller, where you can see I've downloaded a file called m.admx template. This again is going to provide all those template files that allow us to create a policy for AppV. I've already double-clicked on that and installed it, and what it does is it creates its templates in the Windows Policy Definitions folder, and you'll see down here there's AppV ADMX, along with several other files that would enable this. What I recommend you do, this is going to be a little off topic again, but it's very useful for actual server administration of group policy, is that you copy that folder and then that you paste it into the domain. So we're in the Windows sysvol domain, and then policies, and you can see I've already pasted it in here. What that allows us to do, once again, is it allows us to work with group policy on any client computer throughout our network and have a consistent set of settings. Then I open up the Group Policy Management console, where you can see here I've already created an AppV client settings policy in the Phoenix desktops. In order for this to work, any computer accounts that I want it to apply to have to be in the Phoenix desktops OU. Okay, and you can see here that in Phoenix desktops OU and Active Directory users and computers, I've got the Windows 8 client and the Windows Win 8 PC, so I've got a couple of clients there that this should apply to. When I right-click on the policy itself to choose Edit, then we go into the location of AppV, Computer Configuration Settings, Policies, Administrative Templates, System, AppV, and then we have several different settings. Again, these are all exposed and available because of the fact that I installed those templates. Now, you can have multiple publishing servers. I'm just opening up one here, and there's the publishing display name. Here's the URL. Again, remember, publishing is on a different port number, so it's 8081. And then you can specify how often it refreshes and settings of that nature. That's pretty much all there is to that part of it. I do recommend that you also go to scripting and enable package scripts, so if you have any scripts that are part of this, those will also apply. Now, we're not working with any streaming right now, but what you could do with AppV if you wanted to is, instead of even pulling down all the files, if you wanted to just stream the entire application from the AppV server, you can do that as well, and there's certain policy settings there for streaming as well. Now, once that's all been done, I'm pretty much done on the domain controller for group policy settings. Now, I'm ready to go to a client, install the AppV client, and then, hopefully, get our application. Over here on my Windows 8 destination computer, where I intend to deploy the AppV app, I've gone to the desktop optimization pack, and I've inserted the MDOP. And I'm going to go ahead and go to the application virtualization for desktop section where I choose the AppV client and go ahead and OK that. Once that's all been done, we'll just go ahead and allow the wizard to get started here, and we'll click on install. And really, there's not a whole lot to this. It's just kind of a next finish wizard. I'm just going to go ahead and change some of these items, but once that's been done, we should be able to have this client installed, at which point it'll appear as an item in the notification area down here, and we need to right click on that to open it. Once that's done, we can then hopefully bring down our application. Now, another thing to keep in mind is I'm not really quite sure if my group policies, which I launched earlier, have come down yet, so I'm just going to go to a command prompt here, and I'm going to go ahead and refresh policy using GP update space force / force. This will then pull down any policies, whether they've changed or not, from my domain controller, and those are the policies that you saw me edit earlier for AppV. And so then the policy has updated. Oh, there's another thing we should also do. Sometimes this will not work properly either unless you run a PowerShell item. So I'm just going to run PowerShell. Oops, too many letters at once. PowerShell. And I'm going to run that as an administrator here. And then once we get to this, what I'm trying to tell it to do is to allow remote signed applications to execute it. And the reason why that's important is because all of this AppV stuff that happens, even though we've seen wizards and next finish and all that kind of stuff and a UI for it, really behind the scenes when it actually starts to operate, it's really mostly just PowerShell scripts, PowerShell commandlets that are running. So if I don't do what I'm about to show you here, then it will have no way of being able to execute those PowerShell commandlets. So for this, I'll just type set execution policy, and then remote signed. There we go. And then that's pretty much it. We just have to press enter. We'll say yes to the prompt. And then from this point forward, it should be able to accept any of the PowerShell commandlets. And then looks like our AppV client completed setup, so we'll close that up. Like I said before, it'll appear down here in the notification area. I'll right-click on this to choose Open. And then once it does, what we want to happen is to be able to click on the refreshing of it, or the update of it, which is right here. Okay, so we'll click Update, and we should see our application appear on the desktop. And there it is. Okay, so there's WinZip. Now I double-click on it. Probably the first time you launch it, it'll take a little bit longer because it has to pull it down. But after the first time, it should run pretty quickly. In fact, some people would say that there's even performance improvements over running this in a conventional method. I'll give this a couple of moments here to percolate. Apparently, it's still thinking about downloading and running the application. It looks like it's trying. There it goes in the background here. So now, again, there we go. We now have WinZip running. It gives me a message here just about file associations. I'll go ahead and accept that. But notice that it did not give me the prompt or the screen here where it asked me how often I want to see help at every startup or any of that kind of stuff. Because remember, when I packaged this, I'd already told it that I never wanted to see that. So it remembered that as a setting, and here we are. Let's also take a look at a few other things related to this. One thing you can also do is to download all applications so that if you're ever offline, you can access them. In other words, if you're ever disconnected from the AppV server, you can still do that. Also, if I go to virtual apps, it'll show me a list of any of the virtual apps that are here. Notice that it says it's not ready for offline use because I haven't downloaded it. Here's another place where I could click download to download all of WinZip locally here, kind of to cache it, so to speak. Even though I'm downloading the necessarily files to run WinZip, it's still not a conventional installation. So again, we have that advantage here with that. Also, we have a repair item. For example, what if somebody accidentally permanently deleted the shortcut on the desktop, okay? And now my users didn't know how to get WinZip back. Well, all I have to do is to click repair, and you should see that pop back up again. Okay, so a very easy way to repair errant applications as well. Also, remember when I said it was actually mostly PowerShell commands? If you click down here at the bottom and click Show PowerShell Commands, it shows me the actual PowerShell commandlets that have been running this whole time here. So if you want to get some more knowledge about that, you can just use that as a reference. And then to illustrate that, let's go to my Hyper-V server, where you can see that my AppV server has now been shut off. And over here on my client, since I've downloaded the actual app for offline use, I should be able to double click on this and still access it. The usefulness of that, of course, being that if I'm a client that's disconnected from my network, like I'm traveling or something, I should still be able to use that application, provided it has been downloaded for offline use. All right, folks, in this nugget, we took a look at managing AppV applications. My hope is that I was able to get you from here to here without feeling like this. We hopefully got you to some understanding of AppV and all the various moving parts. Of course, again, it wasn't a full discussion, but hopefully I got you to, at least to this point. We took a look at why we wanted to use AppV and some of the advantages. We took a look at the various AppV components, including the AppV server itself, the domain controller, and a couple of Windows clients to make this all work. We looked at the broad steps, and we just completed a demo. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.